Welcome back to the accounts list. One of the things that concerns us greatly is the fact that we act as tax collectors for the government. We are required, if our turnover is more than $75,000 a year at the moment, to levy GST on every sale that we make normally, and against that we can also collect GST and deduct that and hand the net difference over to the government. Hopefully we'll all end up collecting a lot of GST because it means that our revenue is high and our expenses are low. Not everything has GST on it, but the majority of items generally do. If you look carefully at the screen, you'll see that there is a column there marked tax, just here, and it has in there the listing NT or N-T, no tax. MYOB is not in a position to say whether an item that you've got in there has tax or not, so it leaves it actually as a blank, or the default, which is N-T. There are some items in there that will have GST when we go out and make a sale, that will have GST when we actually buy some things. And one of the things we will need to do is to go through and change all those items that have currently N-T to GST. Your accountant presumably will be charging you GST. At the moment it says it's NT. If I highlight that and if I double click on it and then go to the details tag, there it says the tax code is NT. If I click on that down arrow, it comes up with a list of the various tax codes that are set up already in there. Because there's going to be GST on it, all I will do is move to the GST, highlight it, double click it, and I've just changed it to GST. And if I click OK, I can now see that accounting fees is set up with GST. My lawyer, solicitor, when I have to talk to him, he's probably going to want to charge me GST as well. Click on details. I can actually just type in GS and MYOB's autofill will put in the T for me. If I click OK, not a problem. Bank charges, generally speaking, we do not collect the GST. There is actually GST on our bank transactions, but it's a slightly different system. Depreciation, writing off the cost of our assets. Normally there will not be GST on that, nor will there be on amortization. Postage, generally speaking, does have GST, although there is one exception. I'm not in a position to be able to give you taxation advice. I'm not qualified to do so. Therefore, if you want to find out what postage doesn't have GST, you'd better go and ask your tax advisor. Office supplies, subscriptions, advertising, telephones, printing, etc., etc., etc. probably do have GST. You will need to go through each and every line item and just make sure that you've got it set up correctly. Should you, for example, have a subcontractor who charges you GST, then you would have in your cost of goods sales, I'll just go back there and add subcontractors. To do that, I'm looking for a suitable number, 51010. I'll make that 51010. We'll call him a subcontractors. And in the details, I'll put in GST. Now, normally, all my GST, all my subcontractors with GST will go in there. There may be subcontractors who do not collect GST, in which case, when I put the individual transaction in, I can change it at the individual transaction stage. What I'm doing here is setting up general overall guidelines. So for example, materials, generally they will all have GST. A double click, go to details and change it GST and click OK. And so I work my way through all the other things that are in there. The only area in assets, for example, that will have GST is any fixed assets that I might buy, such as leasehold improvements, if I get my own shop, buildings and improvements, my workshop equipment, my motor vehicles. The GST I pay on fixed assets is normally segregated on the GST form that I submit to the government. If I decide that I'm going to be buying some workshop equipment, if I click on that and I look at the details for the tax code, click on there and on the down arrow, rather than have GST, I'm required to report any capital expenditure separately. The second item on there is CAP, Capital Acquisitions. I'll use the CAP there so that when I do my quarterly report, it'll come out and show me that I've spent so much on capital acquisitions and segregate it ready for me to do my return at the appropriate time. I'll use that tax code and click OK. Similarly with motor vehicles, if I have a new motor vehicle, there's probably going to be GST on it, unless I've bought it second-hand from a private individual. Again, I'll change that to details, CAP, and OK. I need to go through each and every line item in there and change accordingly. And when I've done all that, I simply click Close and we'll move back to the main screen, ready for the next section.